you believe? Who do you cite? To you, whom do you ascribe credibility? Here's a news site that I trust, the Washington Post. And this article came out not just in the Washington Post, it came out everywhere. When the study came out in 2016, it came out everywhere. Diba? But if I see this in a website that I do not trust, I look at the URL and the domain name and sabi ko, sino kaya yan? I don't know. Pagka shinare yan ng kaibigan ko, wow, fascinating. But who is he believing in? Who is my friend citing? Hindi ko kilala yung website and so on. So I do my own research and I go to news sites that I believe. I go to Inquirer here in the Philippines. I go to the Philippine Star. I go to Rappler. I go to GMA News. At the time, I was still editor of Interaction.com. I go to Business World, and then I do a basic Google News site. And then if I don't see it in any of these organizations, then I'm wondering, totoo kaya yun? But then I find something in, let's say, in the Washington Post. I just choose this because I think it's safe. Again, it's kayong bahala sumagot on who would you have believed. But when I saw it in the Washington Post, then I'm thinking, okay, probably true. I also look at the site, the science post being cited, and who ultimately, oh, it's from Columbia University. I graduated from there. I took my master's at the journalism school. And I think, okay, that's credible. And I'll go as far as to try to go to the original source and so on. But here's the point of the story: 6 in 10, and this is now scientific. This time I'm not making it up. 6 in 10 people will share a link without reading it. And you've seen that behavior. You've not only seen that behavior, but you understand the temptation of it. Diba? You understand the temptation of it. For a long time, for example, when I was still with Interaction.com, I can tell you, and I think I'm speaking for the entire news industry, what would you guess is the number one hashtag every year? Well, until about 6 years ago. What would you say annually is one of the top 5 hashtags in any news organization in the Philippines? Feel free to volunteer in the chat. Hulaan nyo, what's the number one, what's annually, nasa top hashtag yan for news articles. Yeah? So feel free to manghula kayo sa chat. No? Okay, but I'll tell you the answer. The number one of the top 5 hashtags every year for every news site in the Philippines is hashtag walang pasok. We don't have that behavior anymore. And this will go to my point. No? We don't have that behavior anymore because over the past years, people realized that I don't need to turn to Interaction. I don't need to turn to Rappler. I don't need to turn to Inquirer or Philippine Star or any news organization to find out kung may pasok bukas o wala. Because on Twitter, I only need to follow 2 accounts. Diba? You only need to follow, a high school student or a college student only needs to follow 2 accounts on Twitter for the most important news of their lives. Diba? And they only need to follow the Twitter account of their LGU, and they only need to follow the Twitter account of their mayor. And for them, that is credible. Diba? That is going direct to the source. And the reason also that we don't have that behavior anymore is because all of us also learned the hard way sometimes, is that many people started using hashtag walang pasok and then posting the wrong information. So some will repost, for example, an announcement from the mayor na hashtag walang pasok, but it was actually a retweet from 3 years ago, or it was actually a retweet from 4 years ago. Why do I share this? Because that one example about hashtag walang pasok is an example of how young people made themselves information resilient by asking themselves, who is the most reliable when it comes to announcing whether or not may pasok o wala? can I go straight to the source without even relying on news organizations? And so by having that behavior, we all now inoculated ourselves. We now have vaccinated ourselves from the virus of fake hashtag walang pasok. No? And it is that behavior that has to start infecting everything else we do on social media or any digital platform, or as we go on about our lives. Because this is what all of us look at on a daily basis. And in fact, what's here on the screen probably represents what? What would you guess? Maybe 1/100th of what we look at every day. No? And some of these are posts from my friends, some are posts from strangers, some are posts from news organizations. And here is Wikipedia, here is Google News. And I won't answer for you whom you trust here. But my question is, you have to ask yourselves, whom do you trust? I put in Wikipedia here because a lot of young people and even news organizations, much to my dismay, will keep quoting Wikipedia because they feel that, okay, it's Wikipedia, that's reliable. But anybody who has really used Wikipedia understands that you can edit any article in Wikipedia. I can edit any article in Wikipedia, and I can edit it to make somebody who's dead alive, and I can edit it to make somebody who's corrupt seem not corrupt, somebody who has been convicted appear to have had his or her case dismissed, and so on. And so for me, that is a cardinal sin. As soon as I see a news organization or my children or any student or any person citing Wikipedia, it's immediately for me a red flag. Which is not to say that Wikipedia is not useful. It is useful for basic research to start you off on certain things. But as something to cite authoritatively, it's pointless. No. And then Google News, ganun din, di ba? You can Google does the job for you of curating for you. So Google says, sa Google News, it is not a free for all. Hindi ka basta-bastang papasok diyan. Google is lending its brand to say that we will only put up things that are actually from a news organization that we know, that we recognize, and so on. We do not vouch for 100% accuracy of their content. We are not responsible for their content, but we will put our brand on the line and say that this much you can trust. These are genuine news organizations. And what does a genuine news organization mean? And that's something when you do the exercise of asking, who do you trust? A genuine news organization is basically saying, we will do you the service and we will do you the favor of curating the news for you. And yes, we will arrogate unto ourselves. No, we will have the audacity to say that we are paid full time for this. And this is what journalism is all about. That we will do our best and stake and our entire reputation on how good are we in balancing news? How good are we in telling you what is newsworthy and so on? And everything here on paper is not based on what's trending. It is not based on what are people searching for. Everything on the front page, for example, of any newspaper is basically news organizations saying, wala akong alam about trending, wala akong alam about ano yung pinagsa-search nyo kahapon, so on. Pagka nasa front page yan, we're just saying we think that's the most important thing that you should know about. And so that is one thing that we have lost. We have lost curated news. In other words, we have lost news that has been curated and chosen and lined up by professional journalists and professional editors ahead for all of you. When you look at your feed this way, nothing is curating this for you except your friends and your own biases. And that's what we mean when we say that Facebook and Google algorithms are the ones curating for you. It doesn't mean anything. When they say that it is algorithms curating for you, it means You are curating for yourselves. It is your own biases. It's not even your friends. It is your own biases. It is your own interest. And so you'll notice na you get more news about gaming than your friends. You get more news about beauty tips than your friends. Or maybe you get more news about Southeast Asia because you're a nerd about Southeast Asia. Or you're getting more news about history, about science, and so on. Some of it are good. I'm not judging any of these things. But you notice that you are creating your own bubble. And so it is not really your friends, it is really your own biases, even when it comes to your friends. And let me just breeze through this. This is why we set up Puma Podcast. And this is why I set up podcasting. It's a smaller audience. And why we got into it is because I think part of the problem here is that in a marketplace like this, everybody tries to have the loudest voice. Everybody has the all caps. Everybody's trying to have the most following, and so on. And we all know that the best practices for getting following is not necessarily the best practices for good journalism and good storytelling. So in Puma Podcast, I feel that we have to go to the other side of the equation of not just knowing how to speak well, not just how to give your opinion well. That's very important, and I think especially for young people, you have to get that habit of speaking up. Absolutely, but we are also losing the muscle that we have in our minds and in our hearts to listen, to just be quiet and listen. And then that's why I'm so in love and I'm so sold on the power of podcasting. Um, Puma Podcast, we'd like to say, and we're very proud of it. We're the first Filipino podcast archived in the U.S. Library of Congress. And when we say that we are the first podcast, we're really referring to a lot of podcasts. It's not just one feed of Puma Podcast. That's our vision, a world that listens. We've gotten some support from these organizations, including the Facebook Journalism Project, um, and so on, really trying to encourage more people to listen to this. These are some of the things that we have produced. You see that we produce for the Philippine Daily Inquirer their podcast, itong Super Evil sa baba, kita nyo, TED Talks, Randy David's Conversations, we produced that. Conservative Ako is a sex podcast by Dr. Rica Cruz, who's a licensed sex therapist who teaches at Ateneo, and so on and so forth. Tokhang sa Tokhang is a documentary on the war on drugs. For a lot of people, they've never heard of such a thing, an audio documentary, not a video. That is a six-part documentary, and that's actually the one that got noticed by the U.S. Library of Congress. That was the first thing that they uploaded. The podcast preservation project was something that the U.S. Library of Congress launched at the start of 2020. And until they put us there, 99.9% of the content there was from North America, and Europe. And we were the first podcast out of the Philippines, and for that matter, out of Asia to be included. And they've now curated our other podcasts. Teka Teka, for example, is a news feed. It's a 3 times a week news feed. COVID Corner was spun out of Teka Teka because we were doing these specials interviewing scientists about COVID, not to politicians, but really talking to Filipino scientists who really understand it. WhatsApp is pop history. Usapang Econ is the group by Rappler's economic columnist JC Punong Bayan, and he has his own group, and we're doing their podcast for economics explainers, again trying to address the issue of innumeracy. Musicaligot is a it's a fun podcast. It's a feature podcast, but I would really encourage everyone to listen. It's about music in the Philippines, music element in the Philippines. And what we do is we talk to music nerds, the Dean of the College of Music at the University of the Philippines. We break it down. So for example, may conversation dyan about, bakit mahilig ang Pilipino sa birit? And we go through the history of it, the etymology of birit. No, birit does not mean beat it. It actually comes from a word in Nueva Vizcaya, and so on and so forth. And as I said, we produce Inquirer's podcast, including Super Evil, which is also a podcast documentary about, I think the first part was about the Mayor Sanchez of Calauan and the UPLB murders. And we're now in the second season recounting what happened in the Maguindanao massacre, in the Ampatuan massacres. So find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But the point lang dito is that's our vision. This is the reason why I got into podcasting. It's because of everything else I discussed. I really feel that one thing that I have, that my organization has, and yes, we will arrogate it unto ourselves, is the ability to produce content that is isolated from social media. Walang bangayan dito. And when you click play, you don't have a choice. You listen to us. And when you listen to us, you either find us credible or you don't and never come back ever again. But we will take on the burden of pressuring ourselves to be credible, to not serve up anything. In other words, to bring back the old values of journalism and the old proposition. It's not old values. The values are the same for digital as well as for old formats. But the proposition of curated content na pinili namin to for you so that you can decide if we or other news organizations are credible to you. But what is clear is that you have to ask yourselves that question. Whom do you believe? Whom do you cite? To whom do you ascribe credibility? And if all of us constantly ask ourselves this, then it doesn't matter how much fake information is out there. This will be the first crucial step in creating an information resilient queue and an information resilient Philippines and an information resilient world. So that's it. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Robbie. We learned a lot about, I'm pretty sure our SK leaders and emerging community leaders from different organizations have learned a lot from your talk. Now, we'd like to open the floor for question and answer, and we will be entertaining some questions from our leaders. Please be reminded, everyone, that you can use the chat option to chat or raise your questions. And for now, we will just be reading some of your questions para hindi tayo magulo. But I'll just raise the first question to Sir Robbie. Sir Robbie, you have been working with different media organizations like TV5, Business World, Interaction, and many others. Given that you've provided the context of this massive change in media, that being very traditionally journalistic before, na peer review and everything, and now it's very democratized. Everyone can be a source of truth. Do you think, if you look at it in general, in perspective, is it worth celebrating or is it something to regret?
No, I think it's worth celebrating. The democratization of news, and also now you have social media putting a check on media, di ba? We were all so powerful before, and now there is that check and balance provided by the public as well. No, but I don't really think it's so much a question of is it positive or negative. It's just the reality. We have to stop fighting it and we have to start figuring it out. Unfortunately, we haven't figured it out. Nobody has figured it out. But I think it's just a reality that we start from. People are now on their digital platforms. People are taking their news straight from social media. And then we also know that as you consume more via social media, the narrower and narrower your field of view becomes, because social media is essentially saying, ay, ang bad trip mo? O sige, di ito pa. O di damihan pa natin yung balita tungkol sa kahapon. No? Interested ka pala sa royal news. O di sige, di mapapansin nyo, dumadami ngayon yung feed mo about Meghan and Harry, di ba? Interested ka pala sa K-pop. O sige, di damihan pa natin yung balita tungkol kay Hyunbin, 'di ba? Or so on and so forth. So these are just realities that tell us these are the starting point. There's no point in crying or over glorifying it. The important thing is to learn from it, and the media, the journalists and the editors, we're trying to learn from it from the supply side. And from the supply side, it's very hard because we can't control the platform. We have no control over Facebook and Twitter, no, except to try to provide some moral feedback and so on. And that's why the whole point of my talk is, but what can we control on the demand side? What can we control on the side of your family, and most importantly, of the students? I really believe we keep talking about fake news, and we talk about fake news and misinformation, and we try to talk to the media, we try to talk to journalists, and we try to talk to Facebook and Google and Twitter and Instagram, but all of that is supply side, no? And on the demand side, I think a lot of the investment should really go to the education sector. I think children, as soon as children hold on to some kind of digital gadget and are left alone with it, they should have some kind of fundamental trainings on information literacy, and that should start in grade school. And the reality for our families is yung pamangkin nyo, yung pinsan nyo, yung kapatid nyo, they're holding an iPhone or a tablet or an Android gadget as young as what, 2 years old. So you have to start early in filtering for them, as well as teaching them proper behavior.
Okay, Sir Robbie, there is a question on the legitimacy of the information that comes from media outlets. It's a question
Mm.
from Mr. Maru Cruz. Can we always be assured that news websites such as MB, Felstar, Inquirer, Rappler are really sources of true and factual news? Your take.
Mm. What I can assure you is that you can be assured that that is their job. You can be assured that they take it as their job to be credible. They will make mistakes. They will make mistakes. Even ako. I mean, I've had to make public apologies because we published news that was inaccurate or that the context was wrong. We've had to do that. Everybody makes mistakes. But what we can assure you is all the news organizations understand that if I lose my credibility, I lose my job. Diba? And if we lose our standing in society, we lose our business. And that, what you have to understand is, trabaho namin yun, racket namin yan eh. Diba? And so it's fair for everybody to say, hindi pala credible yan eh. Diba? And so let's all abandon it. And when people basically accept that you are not credible, then you're dead. Diba? And leave it at that. But so for the organization specifically that you mentioned, I will say that um, they know that their mission is to be true and to be factual, as objective as possible. They themselves cannot vouch that everything is 100%, but they know that that's the target. That's the KPI. That's the indicator. That is what and so it has to have that feedback mechanism all the time, and it is constant for us. If we see our numbers going down in real time, we know that something's wrong, and it's not about us uh, complaining na we're losing. I don't know if our credibility is going down. Of course, there is a function here of social media, the distribution platform being separate from us and having more control. And there is this problem of, as I said, of the audience themselves not really knowing, well, what is credible in the first place. It's possible that the audience believes that, notwithstanding the fact that we cite scientific journals and we cite officials and we attribute to facts and so on, that the audience is so lost and so poisoned by the well on social media that talo pa rin kami, di ba? But that is why it goes to my point na beyond what we try to do and beyond what these news organizations try to do, we can only worry about what we can control. And so we can only control and worry about our content. But we cannot control how you behave, diba? And for that, I think it takes a whole of nation approach, a whole of society approach. How do we teach children and old children and our oldest children and our lolos and lolas how to make that decision on their own? And how do we give them the tools to answer that for themselves? How do we know what is credible or not?
Okay. Sir Robbie, I like the take on extremism. You can't really go that extreme as a media entity because you will lose your business. It's more of like similar to politicians and like probably losing elections if they actually go too radical. I want to pull this question up. This is a question on media and information literacy from Justin Torzar. How can we measure or evaluate the level of competencies of teachers teaching media and information literacy?
Hmm. That's a good question. I really don't know. I'm not an expert in the education system, but I do know that there are many people in the private sector and the public sector asking that very question. It's a very important question. What's encouraging is that this is a question that's being discussed at a very serious level and at a very high level as well. Even by DepEd and so on. Look, parang, yung mga nakikita nyo naman sa DepEd na mga nagva-viral na mga memes na palpak yung ano. In all fairness, wala pang social media nangyayari na yan. I mean, it really is a commentary more than anything for me about disparity in our society, where you have these public schools having really terrible content and so on, and really egregious mistakes. But that's always been a problem. I do think it comes down to corruption. I do think it comes down to not corruption sa level ng sino nagpapatakbo ng DepEd, but corruption in the sense that you have the same suppliers for textbooks who have been there for decades and kampante na sila, and they don't bother to check anymore kasi they'll get the contract anyway. But I'm not an expert in all of that. All I know is that it's an important conversation, and really dedicated people, both in the public and private sectors and government, are having that conversation.
Okay, Sir Robbie, there's a question from Andrea. This is a question on fake news and disinformation and how lack of access to credible information can be a conduit to the propagation of misinformation and fake news. Now, the question is, how can the youth and SK leaders be a participant on the conversation of bringing these creative projects and activities to inform people and really fight fake news?
I think you have to join the conversation. Unfortunately, despite everything that I said, there is that game to be played at the level of your communities of who has not only the loudest, but the most credible voice.
Okay, I think we lost Sir Robbie for a while. Let's just wait for him a little, no? Maybe we can actually. Okay, I think there's a problem with the internet connection of Sir Robbie. Let's just wait a little while we're reading the comments of the other participants here. Okay, let's pull some of the conversations from our participants. Here's a question from Michael Lance. While we're waiting for our tech specialist to pull Mr. Robbie.
Hi, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay, Sir Robbie. Yeah. I think we're going to entertain two more questions. Okay, for the benefit of everybody. The question from Michael Lance, and I think you can also read it in chat. Are you in favor of an Australian law requiring social media and search engines to pay news and media outlets for linking their content in their news feeds, timelines, and search results?
It's tricky. I wish there was a simple answer. All I can say is I completely understand um, uh, both the risks and the potential rewards. Um, the reality is that 90% of our reach is totally reliable on is totally dependent on these social media platforms. And for that matter, okay, I'll make up a statistic again, but it's fairly reliable. But it's something like 70 to 90% of all digital ads revenue goes straight to Facebook and to Google. And by Google, we mean it includes YouTube, and by Facebook, that includes Instagram and all the platforms that they control. And so you now have what, 10%, 15%, 20% of all digital ads na paghatian na lang ng mga and we're literally fighting for pennies. You're literally fighting for a few centavos, or a fraction of a centavo for every hit. And that generates a lot of bad habits. It generates bad habits for us, because for us to get the most number of engagement, we have to use the lowest quality information. Diba? It is yung mga bangayan, yung away, ano yung grades ni Bimbi, sinong naghubad, sino nag-away, and so on and so forth. And that's not necessarily the news that we want to invest in. But on the other side of it, that's the news that you consume. It's the news that many people consume. So I don't want to pretend that I know what the real answer is, but I think it's a fight worth monitoring what happens, because the downside there also, sorry, the downside there for the Australians also is it might deprive a lot of people of access to really important news as well. It might deprive people a lot of access to very important platforms. So it's a real dilemma, but that debate was inevitable, and we have to confront it as one way or the other.
Okay, Sir Robbie, if it's okay, we have two questions na lang. I think we have one participant who really pulled this question again about the ABS-CBN shutdown, and he really wanted to have this answered. What can you say about the new media landscape regarding ABS-CBN shutdown vis-a-vis denied franchise and status of media outlets under the limited moves during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, it's an attack on press freedom. There's no question about that, di ba? Parang people can say what they want, but I don't think anybody can deny that that was politically motivated. President Duterte was explicitly attacking and sa akin simple lang eh. You can ask any congressman and you tell them, just answer in one sentence. Di ba? Just one answer in one sentence, and this is not an unreasonable, it's not an unreasonable question. What law did ABS-CBN violate? And if they can answer in 5 words, it's not unreasonable. That's not an unreasonable. If they can answer in 5 words, then they can convince you na yung tama yung ginawa nila. Yeah? But look at the parade of regulators that they got. You got the SEC, they got the BRR, they got the NTC. You have constitutional experts. You have so many people, and time and again, everybody said, wala pong atraso ang ABS-CBN sa amin. No, they pay their taxes. No, they did not violate any rules sa NTC, and so on. And here is the other thing that they did. They keep insisting na no. At the end of the day, what they wanted to end was an oligarchy, which is ridiculous, and it's also unfair. I would also say it is very, very clear denial of due process in this sense. Kung oligarchy pala yung pinag-uusapan, then how come that word hardly ever came up during the entire hearings? And then after they stopped ABS-CBN, after they stopped asking all of these questions of ABS-CBN, all of a sudden, oligarchy came up, what? How many times in the final day of the hearings as they voted? Diba? So kung yung pala yung pinag-uusapan, di sana pinag-uusapan na from the start. But from the start, they were talking about taxes. They were talking about franchise. They were talking about the license. They were talking about NTC regulations. They were talking about SEC. They were talking about citizenship. And time and again, regulators said, no, wala kaming question dyan. No problem with citizenship. No problem with taxes. No problem with NTC regulations, and so on. And then all of a sudden, in the final day, just before they vote, everybody's just talking about oligarchy. And so for me, that's clear denial of due process, and that was clearly an attack on the press, and not just ABS-CBN. It was a signal to everyone in Philippine media.
Okay, Sir Robbie, we're down to the last question. Finally, I personally love this question because it's about diversity and inclusion. To be media literate, we must know if certain views are being left out of a story, especially in mainstream media. Now, how does diversity representation in the media affect identity, especially in minority groups?
Yeah, that's very true. Not just leaving out, no? I mean, not just leaving out. Sometimes yung context ng discussion ng identity or any particular group sometimes is loaded. No? So for a long time, we had to unlearn the habit of saying the religious affiliation, for example, of a murderer, or the religious affiliation of somebody who bombs a particular place. These are bad habits that really create stereotypes, and that is wrong. And then yun nga, there is equally insidious is the lack of representation in media. But here's the thing: if you read the traditional news, it's already come a long way in representing IPs. You have community papers as well that are doing a very important a job that you have never heard of. But all of that, when I talk about information resiliency, it's really up to you. You diversify, because usually this is what's happening. You see what I mean when I say that all of our discussion about media literacy is on the supply side. Everybody's asking, how do we get newspapers to be better? How do we get journalists to be better behaved? How do we get newspapers and news media to be representing the indigenous peoples, and having more gender balance, and representing issues about women, about sustainable development, about children, and so on and so forth. And we can only answer that, okay, good point, noted, we'll try. But there is something that you can do right now, which is to make yourself information resilient. And that's completely on the demand side. The demand side is you. If you're demanding it and we're not supplying it, iiyak na lang tayo. No. If you're demanding it and we're not supplying it, then go look for somebody else who is supplying it. You want more news about Mindanao? Follow Mindanews. One of the best news organizations in the Philippines, hands down, bar none. Diba? Follow your community paper. Diba? Kung anumang probinsya kayo, diba? Listen to your radio programs. Listen to to the news organizations there. Read your community papers. Try to figure out also how to keep your community papers alive. Hopefully, we do better on our side. But even without that, you're not helpless. You have a lot of information at your disposal that you can follow. And that you can encourage and you can support. And that's what being information resilient means. You make yourself better. You teach yourself na, teka muna, hindi ko na kailangan sundan tong Rappler, Inquirer, GMA, Interaction, lahat yan. Hindi ko na kailangan sundan yan kung ang gusto ko lang malaman, #walang pasok. Hindi na. Sundan ko na lang yung mayor ko, sundan ko na lang yung LGU ko. Then alam ko, 'di ba? That's official, 'di ba? So that one example, I go back to that one example. That one example is an example of what it means to be information resilient in you, without having to rely on waiting for media to get everything right.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Robbie, for all the insightful for all the insights and the quality conversations you've shared to us. Before we give you the certificate, Sir Robbie, do you have some parting words for our viewers, for our SK leaders and emerging community leaders?
Please follow Puma Podcast. If you're listening to podcast, please like and follow. Happy na ako sa thank you doon. I don't need the certificate and so on. But we're a small organization as well. We're trying to really encourage podcasting as a platform, not just for commentary. I mean, God bless everybody who's trying to encourage podcasts, but most of the podcasts right now are really uh, it's the same thing, di ba? Parang it's all talk. They'll wake up, they'll hit record and say, what do I want to talk about today? That's fine. You get a diversity of voices, people talking about their particular interests, their particular advocacies. So we would encourage that. But what Puma Podcast particularly is trying to do is to bring the values of journalism and good storytelling. So it's not just people um, just talking into mic. We produce it. If you've never heard a podcast documentary with music and sound bites and sound effects, and really, we would really encourage you that you try us out. So please do follow Puma Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. If you follow Puma Podcast, then that will lead you hopefully into an introduction to all the other podcasts that we do. But to know more about that, you can follow us on the platforms where you listen to audio, or follow Puma Podcast and Teka Teka for starters on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay, great. And I think we also have some questions about how to reach you, Sir Robbie, in the chat option. But anyway, to show our appreciation for Mr. Robbie's generosity of his time and keen sharing of knowledge to our participants, here is an e-certificate citing his contributions to the ongoing advocacy of Media Civics Lab for promoting media literacy in the country. So let me just read the citation in the certificate. Okay, the certificate of appreciation is given to Mr. Robbie Alampay for sharing his valuable knowledge as guest speaker during the Media Civics Lab seminar workshop on media literacy and awareness given this 13th day of March 2021 in Manila, Philippines. Signed by yours truly and Nina Lewis, Assistant Cultural Affairs Officer of the Embassy of the United States in the Philippines. Let's all give Mr. Robbie Alampay a virtual applause.
Maraming salamat po, and please take note, I put in my email address doon sa chat. It's simply Robbie with one B and a Y, Robbie at pumapodcast.com.
Thank you so much, Sir Robbie. We're glad to have you here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this point of the program, we're going to have a breakout session to be led by our partner organization, Foundation for Media Alternatives and Move PH. So let's all welcome Bern Soriano, Program Coordinator of the Initiative for Media Freedom Program of the Foundation for Media Alternatives.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for the introduction, Gab. So, yeah, actually, I'll just be saying a few words about what we're going to do in the next couple of minutes. So, magkakaroon tayo ng mga breakout groups. So, all of the participants will be moved to 3 main groups or main breakout rooms. And from there, our facilitators will then lead the activity. So it's a little bit of self-assessment also. Hopefully there will be a lively discussion because of the activities. And I'd also like to thank Move PH, who is our partner for this breakout session activity. So without much ado, I'd like to ask our tech specialist to bring us to our breakout sessions now.
Hi, Therese. You want to join the session? Um, if in case you want to, just let me know. I'll move you to observe. Thank you.
Hi, Claire.
Hello. So yes,
Hello,
we're back.
Burns.
Okay. So are we all back? Okay. So I hope everyone had a, yeah, very fruitful discussion. And sana yun nga, yung parang dun sa ating breakout activity, yung nagkaroon din kayo ng konting self-assessment. Then maybe yung questions din na yun can be something that we can also kumbaga use for your own personal ano din na when you're doing something, for example, posting something on social media, maybe when you're also reading something, etc. So, I'm sure marami pa kayong other gustong i-bring up or discuss na during sa breakout session. Very limited din kasi yung time natin, but we can all ano din naman sa chat if meron pa kayong feedback or input or question doon. So I'd just like to call si Jean just to ano then wrap up the following points.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Jen from Move PH, the Civic Engagement Arm of Rappler. So I hope you had a productive time during the breakout session. So basically, just to wrap up lang, we've learned it's actually just very short, but I hope that it was fruitful for you also to be able to assess some of the social media habits and how you can also improve your habits online. So just to synthesize lang, in the exercise, we've learned how to be able to, yung ano lang, that awareness to be mindful also of our emotion, that it triggers us to be able to post online. At the same time, it shouldn't come at the expense of the truth. So we should also be mindful about what we post and what we also consume as well. And given the instances when we've had experience on sharing false information that could mislead others, we can also correct the other people in a respectful manner. So all these things, I'm sure it's also it's actually doable. So just to leave you with it's just a brief one, but if you would like to expound more on how we can help you as well on social yung social media etiquette aspect, you can also read up. Keep yourself informed and updated. You can visit rappler.com/factcheck for our Rappler's fact check pieces. Actually, the exercise that you've seen in the activity 3 is a fact check story that was written by one of our graduates for the fact checking mentorship program. So she was able to write it during the time of the disaster. So see how it's actually helpful even in times of disaster. And you can also join our webinars and trainings to learn more about fact checking. And we also do webinars that promote media and information literacy. So if you are part of a campus publication or you're with a school organization, you can reach out to us to co-organize events. So you can send an email to move.ph@rappler.com to inquire about it. And of course, you can take part in the online community of fact check volunteers. So if you're also if you feel like you're intimidated, is fact checking really for me or something like that, we can jumpstart the discussion, join the fact checking in the Philippines Facebook group. And of course, think before you share. From takeaway in this activity and also from the talk that we've had in the first session, you can ask yourself, is this content verified? Does it come from authorities like scientific, official? Is it reliable and accountable sources? So all these things are some of the questions to keep in mind. And ayun, just last na lang, since we're talking about sources here, I'd like to invite you all to our upcoming webinar this coming Friday. This is actually the first, because in 2020, we've had more than 20 webinars that tackle about fact checking and media information literacy. So this Friday at 4 p.m., that's March 19, we'll be having a webinar on scrutinizing digital sources, how to improve your information diet. So joining us in this session, Ms. Rappler's head for digital strategy will be joining this afternoon then in the session, Ms. Gemma Mendoza and Melinda De Jesus of CMFR. I think she joined the first session of this seminar workshop. So I hope I hope to see you guys there. And thank you so much for this opportunity, FMA and Break the Fake Movement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jean. Thank you so much, Burns, for the productive workshop. Foundation for Media Alternatives and Move.ph, everyone. So I hope that you learned something from the breakout session. I know that all of those curriculums are tailored fit for you guys to really learn something from media literacy and awareness. Now, before we start with our presenting partner organizations, the first session will be coming from the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication. Now, let me just share something about AIGC. The Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication is a knowledge management center organized in 1980 as a journalism graduate school. It was founded on the philosophy that communication is a vital development resource to advance the common good. AIJC keeps on reinventing its programs and services to make them more relevant and responsive to a fast evolving knowledge society while remaining committed to its communication mandate for development. So, to talk about integrating media literacy, media information and literacy to organization policies, let's all welcome Therese of AIGC.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Gab. I'm very happy to join you today. But first, I would like to share my screen. Do I have permission?
Yes, you have.
Okay, there. Okay, can you see my full screen?
Yes, we can see it. Clear.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Therese San Diego Torres of the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication, or AIJC. I am the director of the Research Policy and Advocacy Unit. And I'm very grateful for the invitation from partners to be part of the media civics seminar work and awareness. And they asked me to talk about how your local youth councils, how SKs and other in strategies, a bit about what we do at AIJC.
Okay, we're just having some technical problems. Let's wait for our tech specialist to um, have some advice for Therese, and then we're just going to ask Burns if the next presenter is actually ready, and we'll go back to Therese later on if she is. Okay, Therese, are you there? Okay, can we pull?
Hi.
Okay, we have to wait for our next presenter from Rappler, so we really have to have our tech specialist fix our uh, internet connectivity with Therese. So just hold up a little, guys. I want to actually talk to you a little about media literacy and awareness and some of the highlights of the Media Civics Lab program. Now, the Media Civics Lab is actually a one-year program of the U.S. Embassy, and this has been in partnership with Foundation for Media Alternatives for Phase 2. The conception of this program is really to make sure that we are grooming the next breed of media literacy champions from the countryside. And that's not just going to be Imperial Manila. So we really are very happy that we were able to get a lot of partners on board for this program. We were able to get AIGC, some fact-checking organizations like Rappler and Verifiles, and many other implementing organizations as well, like Digital Rights Coalition and Foundation for Media Alternatives. Okay, let's do another check with Therese. Therese, are you ready?
Yes, sorry about that. I got disconnected on one of my devices, but I'm ready now. Can you see my full screen?
I can see your full screen. Okay, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. I'll just do make sure that I won't get disconnected again, I'll just stop my video for now. Okay, so on the screen, we have some photos from our MIL initiatives. These include training for media and information literacy, or MIL teachers in senior high school. We conducted a series of workshops for them in 2019 to early 2020 about news literacy. This was sponsored by Google and some other partners, including the University of Hong Kong. We also have another project with UNESCO on the media and information literacy and youth civic engagement in the Philippines, which involves 30 youth organizations from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So here we are conducting workshops and coaching sessions with them on how they can integrate MIL into their policies, strategies, and activities. So those are some of the things that we've been doing, and we'd like to share our experiences with you through this session. So my session is divided into 3 parts, followed by an open forum. We will talk about community issues that may be addressed through MIL, followed by the MIL framework in youth civic engagement in the Philippines, and MIL policy and action plan development. First, let's start with a definition. So UNESCO defines MIL as a set of competencies that empowers citizens to access, retrieve, understand, evaluate, and use, create, as well as share information and media content in all formats using various tools in a critical, ethical, and effective way in order to participate and engage in personal, professional, and societal activities. So it is a composite concept combining both media literacy and information literacy, and this enables us to develop critical thinking and problem solving while also increasing collaboration and participation. And that's why all of us, especially you as youth leaders, it is important for us to have MIL competencies, to be empowered with MIL competencies so that we can engage more meaningfully in different activities in our communities. So how do we do this? How do we operationalize MIL? How do we help mainstream MIL in our own communities? So we start with the question, what are the most urgent issues and concerns in your community, and which ones could be addressed through MIL? So in our current project with the youth organizations in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, these are some of the issues that emerged. We conducted interviews with them as well as an online survey, and most of them pointed out the vulnerability of not only the youth, but also individuals, citizens across various age groups. The vulnerability to false information, such as information on health, particularly COVID-19. So Sir Robbie mentioned this earlier. We see false information not only on social media, but also in our chat groups, right? We hear or we receive messages from friends, from family members, titos, titas, cousins, and a lot of these messages contain unverified information about, for example, the cure for COVID-19, the causes. So this is something that they're very concerned about. Another is the issue of gap in access to information and education, especially in disconnected communities. And connected with this is the lack of access or inclusive activities, rather, for the youth and other citizens without internet access. And in fact, one of our youth organizations, participating youth organizations, pointed out during a webinar that the activity itself, the webinar activity itself, is a privilege. It is something that only the participating youth organizations with internet access can attend. And that's why we also opened, we also set up workshops by phone, via mobile phone, for one of the participating organizations that had difficulty accessing the internet, which is the Lanao Youth Council based in Marawi. So we also learned from them the different ways that we can make our activities more inclusive. So that's another issue. And then another other issues cited are cyberbullying, hate speech, and cancel culture. So they noticed that on social media, if somebody makes a mistake, somebody messes up, ang nangyayari, instead of giving constructive criticism or advice, that person is bashed. Napapansin niyo ba yun? It's quite, parang automatic siya. If somebody makes a mistake, it becomes public, lalo na if it's a celebrity, an influencer, somebody nakilala, right? Naka-cancel siya. And this leads to, connected na yung issues ng cyberbullying, connected na dun yung issue ng hate speech. And the last one that was commonly cited by the youth organizations is the issue of unclear understanding of the role of media and journalism in democracy. So may mga youth organizations that pointed out how people seem to misunderstand the role of journalists, especially when they criticize the government, for example. Marami silang nakikita na posts on social media about how their friends, even their classmates, do not understand that journalism has a watchdog role. And kailangan talaga ang journalists binabantayan yung ginagawa ng gobyerno, at ang journalists, yun ang role to hold the government accountable. So these are just some of the issues that emerged from that situation analysis. And perhaps in the open forum or in the comments, you can share as well, ano ba yung most urgent issues and concerns in your community that could be addressed through media and information literacy. So two of our organizations, our participating organizations, are the Association of Young Environmental Journalists and the Tacloban Peer Educators Association. AYEJ, the first one, pointed out that the problem that they want to address in their community, particularly in Dumaguete and Cagayan de Oro, is the spread of false information about environmental issues. And how are they addressing this? They are proposing MIL activities, including Usapang Kalikasan webinar and environmental stories that debunk false information about the environment. On the other hand, TPEA pointed out the increase in the rate of teenage pregnancy in Tacloban and the misconceptions about adolescent sexual and reproductive health, or ASRH, and HIV and AIDS. So their proposed ML activities na actually nasimulan na rin nila are webinars, advocacy videos, radio and TV guesting, and a newsletter. So these are just some ideas of what organizations can do to tackle very specific problems or issues that could be addressed through MIL. I'll show you a very short clip, under 2 minutes. This is an interview with one of the chapter presidents of the Association of Environmental Journalists in the Philippines.
Hi, I'm Francis Ryan Basapamyanya. My friends call me Francis, and I'm the chapter president of Association of Young Environmental Journalists, or AYEJ Incorporated, in Dumaguete City, Negros Oriental. Started out as an informal network of earth warriors and storytellers in 2017, AYEJ Incorporated is a startup media organization and environmental nonprofit working to engage and educate civil society on environmental sustainability through youth development and journalism. AYEJ Incorporated is now planning to start the practice of media and information literacy, especially in integrating it into our policies. So the one reason why it is important for the youth to be empowered with MIL competencies is because we are the major users of media. We bridge communities online that are critical and responsible consumers, producers, and distributors of information. And building MIL competencies is important to achieve this. The MIL related objectives that we have prioritized in our MIL action plan are to recognize the need to access information with the technology skills to interact with media and other information providers. The MIL related activities that we will implement are MIL Competencies Webinar, Usapang Kalikasan, to write and to publish environmental stories that debunks false information. The sessions conducted by AIGC helped shape our action plan integrating the strength of correct information in making informed decisions for the community and of course to let the earth be heard. Madamo kag daghang salamat.
Okay, so that is an interview with one of our participating youth organizations. And Break the Fake Movement is actually one of our partners in that project. And they participated in the development of what we call the MIL framework in youth civic engagement in the Philippines. So this is the second part of my presentation. I'm going to tell you a bit about this strategy document developed through a participatory process that we led together with UNESCO, the National Youth Commission, the National Council for Children's Television, Out of the Box Media Literacy Initiative, PAMIL, or the Philippine Association for Media and Information Literacy, Break the Fake Movement, and youth organizations from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. This framework includes proposed actions for generating MIL engagement among Filipino youth organizations, and it aims to stimulate national MIL-related policies in favor of youth organizations and help ensure MIL sensitivity of national policies, especially those related to education, technology, and gender, among others. So there's a list of 11 proposed online actions and 11 proposed offline actions, but I'm just going to share with you some of them to give you an idea. So one of the proposed online actions is the production of vlogs, 1-minute videos, and social media campaigns on fact-checking common misconceptions about various topics aligned with the Philippine Youth Development Plan, such as sexual and non-sexual risk-taking practices, HIV/AIDS, mental health issues, education, workers' rights, LGBTQIA+ issues, PWDs, IPs, the environment, among others. So after the discussion or after the presentation earlier of Sir Robbie, perhaps one thing that could be included here is the production of podcasts. Another is to organize a social media campaign on voter registration and voter education, as well as orientation activities about running for and voting in local and national elections. And then another is the establishment of an online network of counselors who can provide psychosocial support to young people experiencing cyberbullying and other media-related problems. So these are some of the actions that you can pursue in partnership with different organizations such as AIJC, Break the Fake Movement, Rappler, and the other organizations involved in this project. And we can also tell you more about the other organizations who can help you during the open forum. Of course, hindi mawawala yung offline actions. So some of these are events such as hackathons and innovation challenges that stimulate interest among the youth to devise strategies, think creatively, and come up with solutions to key issues in MIL. So pwedeng kasama dito ang art, literature, journalism, learning methodologies, especially for the youth who are teachers, young professionals in the academe, diba? Outreach strategies, web and mobile applications, among others. Pinopropose din yung collaboration with young artists, poets, spoken word artists, musicians, and rappers in creating artwork, literature, and music, focusing on specific MIL-related themes. Nabanggit din ng ilang youth organizations yung pag-organize ng workshops for IT youth on documenting, nurturing, and practicing their indigenous knowledge systems and practices. So some of our youth organizations have already started doing this. And then, of course, we have the production of printed learning kits and flyers on MIL-related topics in the local context and language, especially for the youth in far-flung areas with no internet access or mobile signal. So at first, we were concerned about this because we had this misconception na hindi na patok, diba, sa youth yung printed learning materials. But we learned from some of our youth organizations, our participating youth organizations, na nagagamit pa rin nila yung printed learning kits. And this is from some organizations in Negros in particular. Okay, so next, let's talk about the MIL policy and action plan development. So now that we have some ideas on how we can identify yung MIL-related issues that we can address, and there are already some proposed actions that we can look into, ano na ngayon yung dapat nating tignan before we develop policies on MIL? First, you need to have a clear vision of how your local youth council, your SK, or your youth organization can be engaged in MIL. Ano ba yung sa tingin ninyong pwede ninyong maging role in your particular community based on the MIL-related issues na napapansin ninyo? And then consensus, you need to agree among yourselves on this vision. So your entire team should understand why you want to do this and why you need to do this. You need incentives. So what is your motivation for MIL engagement? One example is being able to detect misinformation or disinformation. So as leaders, diba, kailangan magsimula sa inyo as youth leaders yung pagiging role model in your communities. How can you be a role model? How can you share with your fellow youth how to verify information before sharing? So isang incentive yon na that could motivate your group or your organization. Resources, you need internal and external resources to be able to do this. So internally, yung leaders ninyo dapat handa. It's good that you're undergoing training like this one. And of course, you need external resources. So you need to tap your network of organizations that can help you. And of course, you need to pursue more training, continuous learning dapat. And you will need MIL competencies, the knowledge, attitude, and skills in order to implement MIL policies. And then, of course, you need an action plan, an MIL action plan, which outlines strategies and activities that you need to do in order to achieve your MIL objectives. So on the screen is a screenshot from the SK Operations Manual. This is the action plan matrix for SK. So nakikita ninyo in the next few slides that the MIL action plan template is aligned with the action planning exercise in your SK Operations Manual. Okay, so this is the template that ideally should be added to your organization's main objectives. So what do you aim to achieve in your organization or local youth council in relation to MIL? There are examples in the next few slides. Okay, so next is specific objective. What do you aim to achieve based on your MIL priority areas? So dapat naka-indicate dito, it should be doable within a specific time frame. Why do we need to indicate a specific time frame? We need that so that we can measure it. Darating tayo doon sa monitoring and evaluation indicators. Key stakeholders. So which key stakeholder groups do you need to reach? There may be one or more groups for each specific objective. So I'm sure you know this, diba? Napakahalaga na malaman natin kung sino ba yung pinaka kailangang tutukan for this particular objective. Do you need to focus on high school students in particular, for example? Do you want to focus on college students, etc.? And then that will also be the basis for your activity. You need to identify activities that are appropriate to your key stakeholder. So how do you intend to achieve each specific objective with each key stakeholder group? And then we have the monitoring and evaluation indicators. Monitoring indicators measure your progress toward achieving the objectives and help keep implementation on track. So for example, you need to monitor kung sinong mga nag-participate for activities. Are you covering SK leaders in a particular municipality, for example? So you need to measure that. Ilan sila and at ilan yung naimbita ninyo, ilan yung nakarating. That's just one example. Evaluation indicators, on the other hand, assessment of your objectives and measure in short-term effects, if any. So isang halimbawa nito, yung pag-conduct ng pre-test and post-test among your workshop participants, for example. So if your participants are SK leaders in a particular municipality or a particular barangay, kailangan mag-conduct din kayo ng pre-test and post-test during your activity so that you can check kung nagkaroon sila ng change or increase in knowledge after you conducted the workshop. And then we have means of verification. Ano yung kailangan nating references for the monitoring and evaluation process? So examples of monitoring MOVs for checking the number of webinar participants are yung registration sheets, webinar attendance records, and webinar screenshots. On the other hand, ano yung reference ninyo for the evaluation? These include accomplished pre-test and post-test forms. And the last two columns are self-explanatory. We have the schedule, so yung time frame for your activity, and the resources needed. What financial and human resources do you need for each activity? So on the screen is just an example. So let's say your MIL-related general objective is to promote enhancement of MIL competencies of organization members and the larger community. So yun yung mas general, no, na objective ninyo. How do you narrow down your focus in your specific objective? Example, by February 2021, increase organization members' knowledge on fact-checking health information. So you can see here na talagang napaka-specific nung gusto ninyong ma-achieve. Kailangan ma-indicate ninyo exactly what you want to achieve so that you can measure this. And then you identify your key stakeholder, for example, organization members, activity, example, webinar on fact-checking health information, sample monitoring and evaluation indicators. For monitoring, the number of activities on fact-checking, the number of participants in the activities on fact-checking, evaluation indicator, increase in webinar participants' scores between pre-test and post-test scores. So ano yung increase niya? Ano yung percentage? Sample monitoring means of verification, the activity program, documentation report, directory of registered participants, and sample evaluation MOV, participants' responses to the pre-test and post-test. Okay, so you have your sample schedule, resources needed. It's possible na walang kailangan masyadong financial resources. As our participating youth organizations pointed out, marami sa kanila, they engage in partnerships with other organizations so that they won't have to shell out money just to implement their activities. So I'm going to give a copy of this presentation to Mr. Gabriel Billones so that he can share it with anybody who wishes to have a copy. So now I'm ready to answer your questions. Please feel free to leave them in the chat box, or Gab, can they also unmute ba?
Yes, thank you so much, Therese. I'm pretty sure our participants and our SK leaders already have some great ideas about how to seamlessly integrate MIL into their organizational framework and policies. Thank you, ano. And I really like your discussion about how actually may mga comments dito sa chat na this really doesn't differ that much to a communication campaign plan. That's true. Kasi it's really, ang design nito is to be as easy to integrate, di ba, as possible. And also, we'd like to have this conversation more engaging kasi medyo alas stress na. So I'm pretty sure our participants probably nagkape na pa kayo. May mga nag-drop out na. Hang on, guys, a little. We still have 1 hour. We will be having more conversations, but we will also be wrapping it up para hindi tayo masyadong madrain. Now, do we have anyone who wants to raise a question to Therese? You can unmute yourself and you can actually raise the question directly. Do you have? We have participants like okay, nag-turn off ng video yung mga participants natin.
Actually, Gab, earlier I noticed there was a question related to my presentation from Andrea Rino. But she asked the question during Sir Robbie's session, no? But she was asking how SK leaders can play a role in addressing yung issue that not everyone can check facts due to limited internet access. And then she pointed out the issue na yung Facebook kasi, on the other hand, meron tayong free data, di ba? Free access. So actually, that's one of the things that SK leaders can focus on through their own activities, no? I think it's really important to start small, to start within our own community. So kung yun yung napapansin nating issue, for example, even in our own network, among our friends, among our classmates, for those who are still in school, no? So kung yun yung napapansing issue, ano yung pwedeng gawing activity para ma-address yon? Right? Na how do we share the message na wag tayong umasa sa free data, wag tayong umasa sa free Facebook, and we need to diversify our information sources. Magandang tutukan yun.
I agree with you, Therese. I think it's really always about looking into your immediate community and then transforming that struggle within your community into a media plan or media plan of action. So what resources do you have in your community? Who are your potential partners to implement what you have in mind? And how can you seamlessly implement that as soon as possible? Actually, we have more questions, but I want to hear more. Like, I want to hear the sound of our SK leaders themselves and our emerging community leaders. Leo Lauzon, hi Leo. I think you're familiar to me. Can you unmute yourself and ask the question directly?
Hi Gab. Familiar dahil sa debating days.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to ask our speaker, are there plans to integrate MIL plans to the local youth development plans of SKs? I mean, these plans are much needed of resources, which can be tapped by perhaps integrating these to local youth development plans of SK, wherein they could implement this with their SK resources.
Yes, actually, Leo, right? Thank you very much for that question. And you actually gave me an idea. Kasi initially, yung framework, pinapropose pa lang namin for adoption and dissemination through the National Youth Commission or NYC. And among the next steps indicated in the framework is tapping SK leaders in implementing the framework. So yeah, we should, actually hindi pa siya ginagawa, pero we should be able to do that I'll look into that. Thank you for that idea. So i-integrate natin yung MIL plans sa local youth development plans of mga SK.
Okay, Therese, you have one question from Justin, and he asked this twice in the chat. Do you know any theories related to the use of MIL that can be used to expand the UNESCO framework about MIL?
Okay. Magandang tutukan yung issue kasi ng cognitive bias, right? Cognitive biases. So you can look into that. Pati yung it escapes me now, but related theories to cognitive biases should be integrated into the UNESCO framework about MIL. And you can reach me. I will share my email address in the chat box later because we've conducted research about cognitive biases and the importance of integrating that in MIL education. Naalala ko na cognitive dissonance. So isa pang theory yan. Isa pang communication theory na kailangan nating tutukan when we're talking about MIL. I hope that was helpful.
Okay. Later on, Therese will actually drop her contact details as well on how you can best reach her so that you can continue the conversation about MIL as well. Now, I think we have one more last question before we proceed with Rappler. How can we address MIL issues? Nato juicy tong question niya, ha? Especially if you don't have a position in the barangay, in the local town. If your SK leaders in that particular area are not active. So, ganun yung disclaimer.
Ang ganda ng question ito. Thank you very much, Jerome. You don't need to have a particular official position in the SK or in any organization to do something, no? Kaya maganda talaga to start with your friends, start with your family, start small. Because if, diba, everyone does his part or her part, we'll be able to make changes. So, gawin mo lang. Start with your friends. Talk about these issues. Yung mga issues na napag-usapan natin dito, pag-usapan ninyo with your friends. Diba? That's a very good start.
Okay, I'll wrap up the question, but I have one more question, Therese, and it's also a personal question of mine. How do you actually promote media literacy and awareness among your circle, your friends and families, especially if they are on the other side of the spectrum? And you know what I'm talking about. They seem to be super passionate about probably sharing some fake articles without verifying them and things like that. How do you dismantle those kinds of that skepticism to fighting against that, especially because you're talking to someone that you have emotional baggage with because they're your family? What's your advice?
Really good question, Gab. I know many of us are struggling with this, no? Especially if you're speaking to close friends, close family members. My advice is to listen. Parang yung sinabi rin kanina ni Sir Robbie, it's important for us to listen, number one. And number two, continue to be respectful toward each other. Huwag tayo mag-away-away. Because you will never, you will always have contradicting beliefs, diba, with certain people. Hindi mawawala yun. Right? So, mahalaga lang, maintindihan din natin. Let's try to understand why the other person has that set of beliefs. Diba? Because hindi naman yun basta lang nangyayari. Diba? Kailangan natin maintindihan ano ba yung background niya, ano ba yung experiences niya, bakit kaya yun yung paniniwala niya. Kasama na doon yung posibleng walang MIL training. Diba? Walang understanding of media and information literacy. Kaya, pag may natanggap na message sa chat about the cure for coronavirus, i-share na niya agad, right? So we need to understand that. And then, when we try to explain our side, be respectful, and as much as possible, do it privately. not on a public wall. So kahit nag-post pa yung tita natin, tito natin, pinsa natin on our wall, take the conversation to the to your chat room, your chat thread, your private chat thread, 'di ba? Para mas magandang mas magiging free kayo to explain your side at hindi rin mapapahiya yung other side, 'di ba?
Okay, thank you so much. I think that basically wraps up the Q&A. On the last question, I think I just wanted to add that there's one formula I use, which is the SHR, seen, heard, remembered. I think most people, if not all people, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be remembered. So if you're engaging with someone who is really hesitant in engaging with you, try to use a language or a communication strategy that makes this person feel like he is being seen, he is being heard, and he's being remembered, at least on his opinion and at least on his side of where he is coming from in this conversation. Okay, thank you so much, AIGC. I hope you learned and enjoyed something from the presentation of Therese. Before you go, Therese, would like to actually give you as an e-certificate. So I just read a citation. The certificate of appreciation is given to the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication for sharing their insights and experience as our partner organization during the Media Civics Lab seminar workshop on media literacy and awareness, given this 13th day of March 2021 in Manila, Philippines, signed by yours truly and Nina Lewis of the Embassy of the United States in the Philippines. So let's all give Therese a virtual applause. Thank you so much, Therese. Okay, now...
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Okay, now we're going to actually head on to the last part, the last presenting organization of this Media Civics Lab seminar workshop. Now, the last presenter is from one of the fact-checking organizations in the Philippines, Rappler. And to speak in behalf of Rappler is no other than Miss Gemma B. Mendoza. Ms. Gemma leads Rappler's multi-pronged efforts to address disinformation in digital media, harnessing big data, research, fact-checking, and community workshops. As one of Rappler's pioneers who launched its Facebook page, Move.ph, in 2011, Gemma initiated strategic projects that connect journalism and data with citizen action, particularly in relation to elections, disasters, and other social concerns. So to talk about everything under the sun in the conversation of media literacy and awareness, let's all welcome Ms. Gemma B. Mendoza.
Hello, kumusta na po kayo lahat? Do you hear me? Okay, I'll just share my screen, share my presentation, and let me know if you can see it. Hold on. Nakikita niyo po ba?
We can see it, Ms. Gemma.
Okay, so I'll try to talk about. I was discussing this with one of your co-organizers, and ano daw ba yung i-discuss ko? I was told to discuss the media landscape and deconstructing daw what how information is distributed in this platform. So I'll try to give a sense. First, I'll try to I'll discuss from where we're coming from, like a little bit. You probably know Rappler already, but just a little bit of background in case you're not aware of the other things that we do. And then I'll talk to you about what the methodologies we use, and then I'll also talk about like the landscape, how we see the landscape, and some cascades that we've observed that really affected had real world impact. So yeah, I'll go to that now. First of all, about Rappler. So we're a purely digital news organization born in 2011. We started out on Facebook, on social media. So we know this, we observed the space since then, because what we wanted to really be able to do is to reach scale, and social media at the time that we were born was seen as an opportunity for a news organization, a small news organization, to scale up. and reach broad audiences. So and then we launched our own website, www.rappler.com, in 2012. Okay. We also have as part of the usual news coverage and investigative journalism that we do. We employ like other journalists methods of verification, but over the past years we've also done actively done fact checking. First, in relation to the external fact checking. First, in relation to the Philippine elections during the debates, we were doing live fact checking of debates during the 2016 elections, and then we did our separate when we started seeing a rise in the distribution of what you call fake news, basically misinformation and disinformation. In 2016, we started our separate subsection on Rappler. We devoted a subsection on Rappler for a fact checking for our fact checking project, and since then we become a signatory of the IFCN Code of Principles in 2017, and now one of the two Filipino fact check program partners of Facebook. So basically so those are the things we do in relation to fact checking. But beyond fact checking, we've also been engaging with communities has always been part of the DNA of Rappler. So in relation to fact check, to disinformation and misinformation, we've also done a number of road shows before the pandemic, and then we transformed those road shows into webinars. We've been in the past year, we've done like around 20 webinars around fact checking and MIL. And we've done we've also launched after that a mentorship program where we really trained those who attended this the MIL the fact checking workshops who wanted to go do more and actually do fact checking. We trained them in fact checking, so they've done a number of them have already graduated from this mentorship program, which has done 2 cycles so far. And apart from that, apart from the fact checking and the civic engagement, we really also do research and deep dives into data in relation to disinformation and misinformation and social media and the Philippine social media landscape. One of our earliest studies around this was on this information was the story we published in 2016 when we we discovered this with the help of somebody, a member of our audience, flagged us on the presence of these 26 fake accounts. We observed these 26 fake accounts that were actually we think were basically coordinating. It's a sock puppet network. They're really working in tandem with each other, and then they're in a way that was very misleading. Now we call it basically so in a way that was very misleading. So we studied that network, we reported about it, and that network became the starting point of an observation area. So we looked at the network, the pages and groups that this network of accounts were sharing, and they became the starting point of a wider study on the Philippine information ecosystem on Facebook, and that's what we call now the Shark Tank. So this network now has the data we captured since then is about comprised of over almost 400,000 public posts. We collect only publicly available data, and within those are comments from over for almost 5 million users and 68,000 pages. So it's a very vast ecosystem, and within that ecosystem are a lot of messages that are being distributed to Philippine audiences, and that's something that was really interesting to us, because we felt that it's important to like see how things are shifting through that space, and there's really very little. Facebook is a black box for most of us, and I mean, and there needs to be studies on this, because it needs to be observed. We need to know the impact of it on our society. So that's something we've been doing for the past how many years. Sorry. Now moving on to the larger landscape, I was told to look at the whole information ecosystem and situate our study there. Basically, you're at the point now where actually this is something that that was very recently released by the statistics Philippine Statistics Authority, the latest FLEMS, in the latest FLEMS report, FLEMS survey. And what it says that was really significant to me was this, that people who reported exposure to the internet and social media almost and this was in 2019 yet, before the pandemic. It was almost as far as of the same reach as radio, even then. And then one thing more that was very significant is that cellular phone ownership among households has already exceeded television sets. So that's significant, because what that means is that in terms of information sources, you're already leaning towards, moving towards largely digital space. Although television still is the biggest source of information for the larger audience. Now, digging further into digital, and when the pandemic hit, and siguro everybody here has felt this, we were forced basically to go online. People were basically forced to go online, both for work, and for other activities, for school and so on. So what this meant is a huge escalation in the use of digital acceleration in the use of digital platforms. So while use of other media also accelerated during the pandemic last year, use of digital in the region, and and particularly in the Philippines, increased more. Yung mas lumaki ang use of digital. And doon sa mga nag-aabang ng annual na We Are Social, this is the marketing digital media study that is conducted by Hootsuite. What you will see there is that so internet penetration is around 67% of population, with nearly 100% of these on social. But what's very significant is the increase in number of users in the Philippines. Sorry, it's not here, but the increase in the number of users in the Philippines was really significant. There were 16 million additional users, according to We Are Social, and that's very significant versus the rest of the world. The other significant thing that's been observed over the past years, and this is the reason why we are said to be the social media capital of the world, is because we are the ones who use social the most, every day, and throughout the day. We spend almost 11 hours online every day, nearly 4 hours more than the global average of 7 hours. So that's very significant. It affects how we perceive the world, because it affects the information we consume. And further, this is studies from SWS that came out last year. 1 in 2 of Filipino adults now use Facebook daily as source of news. So when I ask people actually, where do you get your news? A lot of them answer Facebook. So actually, siguro tanungin ko din yung audience ngayon. Alam siguro ninyo yung raise hands feature nitong Zoom. please raise your hand if you also access Facebook, access your news from Facebook. So, pwede bang ano yan? Paki-raise ng hand. Nakikita ko ba kayo? Yeah. Yun, may mga nagre-raise ng hand. So, important yun because if you're using Facebook as your source of news, you really need to understand how Facebook actually delivers your news. And because it's not necessarily, it's being delivered through to you through a particular lens. The other thing that grew significantly last year is the use of chat apps. So, ang laki actually dun sa isang sa isang dashboard that we were looking at. We did a report on this recently. Nag-quadruple yung use ng chat ng messaging apps in the Philippines, and the most used messaging app in the Philippines is, well, Facebook Messenger. So and again, mamaya sasabihin ko how that affects the spread of fake news and misinformation. So very important numbers to think about. Now, I was saying if you're sourcing your news on from Facebook, this is an bali you need to really understand how or sourcing your news from digital and social media. You really need to understand how it delivers information to you. So first of all, social, for the most part, information through digital is accessed now not via desktop. So most people access the internet now through mobile devices, and that means your phones, diba? And you bring your phones with you all the time. You use it for various things. Siguro recently, medyo dumami yung use, baka nabawasan ng konti yung use ng Facebook, pero tumaas yung use ng Lazada na app or whatever. So lumaki din kasi yung e-commerce. But that app that you use, di ba, nag-ano ka, nag-link, nagkiklik ka, nagla-like ka, nagko-comment ka, it's actually listening meaning it's collecting data about you. And that data about you is being used to personalize what you see. So what you see on Facebook, your Facebook feed, is actually customized to you. And very few people are conscious of this, that actually no two persons' feeds are the same. So like there are so many signals that the system, the platform collects about you, and it uses that to sort of edit what you see. And what you see then becomes your view of the world. It affects your view of the world. And there's a recently released book that I urge you to read, The Hype Machine by Sinan Aral. He's an MIT professor that was studying these digital devices, communication, and digital platforms and their impact on society. And he talked about this in that book. He talked about what he calls this technology trifecta. So you have the smartphone as the medium, and then it's collecting data about you, and it forms an impression or knowledge about like what it thinks is a profile of you, and then it uses that to deliver you information about you, and then based on the how you react to that information, and then there's a feedback loop there that then connects to further like further refining what you see based on what seems to be attracting you to engage. And siguro na nakita nyo na to for those na nanonood sa Netflix. This is what the movie sorry, I'll give you the name of the movie. My memory but there's so many movies about this already, documentaries about this already, about how that's affecting how that personalization process is actually driving people to echo chambers, what they call echo chambers, because you're being custom fed information, and that also affects how we interact with the rest of the world. Kasi because ito yung ito yung your version of what you see na to be true, and others have different versions of that, then people become more angry with each other. There's no middle ground. People are basically like seeing only what they like to see or what they usually engage in. And laki ng impact nun sa society. This kind of what you call personalized mass persuasion, and too much ano to, like and basically affecting ano to, parang what you see. It nagko-contribute din to sa sinasabing ano to, cancel culture, 'di ba? Kasi basically dahil sa tingin mo ito na lang, parang nagiging ano ka na lang, parang ito na yung view mo of the world. Yon na ano to, parang wala nang middle ground. And so on. The other thing is, well, there's this trend, there's this thing that he calls, Sinan Aral calls the tyranny of trends. So basically, we don't really see what's important. What we see is the one that got the most engagement, right? And again, that affects what is discussed, and important things that might be boring may not necessarily be discussed. So that's really important. On to this ano to. So what does this mean for information cascade? So you have that personalization, you have all these you have all of these ano to, like the data collection that's going on, but at the same time you have also this global reach, diba? So you're able to reach a huge number, like, so by just going online, you're able to reach so many people. So there's and anybody can actually do that. Anybody can have direct access to audiences. And what that means is that that anybody could be like somebody trustworthy, but it could also be bad actors, right? And we don't really know, because it's so easy to create an account on these various social media. In fact, the stats show that Filipinos on average they'll have 10 user accounts. So imagine that. We were looking at some data about the Facebook users in the Philippines and in various regions, and there were regions where we saw that the number of users far exceeded population. So something to think about, diba? In terms of whether you see what it is delivered to you there is reality or not. And unfortunately here, the human psyche is really, parang prone to getting to things that are what they call novel, or evokes most emotion. So and tendency is this is really why fake news tends to circulate more, kasi a lot of the fake news that you see out there usually they evoke very strong emotions, and they're very novel, yung napaka tapos may mga all caps pa yan, di ba? So yun, medyo because of that, there's a tendency for us na okay na nagalit na tayo, share. Nagalit na tayo, nag-comment, nag-share, and so on. And that also contributes again to the trend, to the virality of that content. So really, really, we need to understand this, because we also contribute to it in the way we react to the system also contributes to how information is distributed within the systems. Now, there's usually studies about like, okay, you have all these all these media groups. There's this perception that media groups still dominate the information landscape. They don't. News groups don't dominate the media landscapes, and we see this on Facebook in particular. this ano to, I talked about the digital the data gathering we've been doing. This data that you see here, the visualizations you see here are based on data we captured through Shark Tank. So we wanted to understand the audiences of these different of the different Facebook groups, Facebook pages that we saw, that we see on that we've been monitoring. And as you can see here, clustering. So in that in the cluster in the upper right, that's ano to, that's the different channels, the different pages. The greens are Facebook pages. The reds are external pages. And what was interesting to us is that, and this is based on as of October 2018, yung data as of October 2018, the loudest, the biggest cluster there, the one at the center, are pro-government clusters. And if you look to the right, if you want to know where are the media groups, they're the red clusters there, to the left of this network. They're kind of sidelined a bit, and to the right, you have that huge cluster of greens. Those are meme pages. So meme pages have quite a lot of reach on Facebook. And why? Because napaka engaging na mga memes, di ba? And the question though is like, how is that affecting public conversations, di ba? So ayun. We also looked at the likes and the shares of content of the various pages that we've been monitoring. So in the graph below, that's the news organizations in red. The red dots are the news organizations, and then the green dots are others. And as you can see here, you can hardly see in that flurry of green yung mga reds, which are the news organizations. These are the biggest news organizations we know of in the Philippines. So the dominant voice on social media is not mainstream news organizations, not the journalists. And this is very important because the question here is that what exactly is the information, what exactly is the content that people are seeing, right? This is not to say that other channels are not not worthy of being listened to, but are those other channels practicing vetting practices that newsrooms practice, di ba? Hindi ko rin sinasabi na newsrooms are totally di ba? Totally like innocent or like totally like blameless or whatever in terms of delivering information, or kung hindi sila nagkakamali. Pero news organizations do practice some vetting processes, verification processes, and that's not always the case for many of the pages out there. So this is just something to think about, because this is the information these are the sources of information, sources of messaging signals that you have now on social media. What did this mean for the pandemic? So when the pandemic hit, as always, actually during crisis, ang napapansin namin, or mga disasters, napapansin namin, may mga lumalaganap dyan ng mga kung ano ng mga haka-haka. And when COVID-19 hit, actually the first we realized much later that the first COVID-19 related fact check pala was fact checked by Rappler. It was this claim that circulated on messaging apps about supposedly yung mga nag-positive daw na mga COVID-19 patients, but it turned out to be not true. So that was back in January 2020. But since then, we worked with an alliance of other fact-check organizations globally. I think as of the last time I checked the website of that alliance, mga around 10,000 hoaxes, false claims, dubious claims already have been fact-checked by the various fact-check organizations around the world, and all of them related to COVID-19 and the pandemic, or government, the responses of governments, or even like criticism of government response. So the UN and the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually called this an infodemic. While you have a pandemic raging, you also have a raging infodemic because of all of these false claims, the use of false claims, including like some very harmful claims about vaccine. So this is a concern now because like one claim about vaccines that we fact check was that supposedly pakana daw ni Bill Gates na magkaroon ng yung vaccines daw parang magkakaroon ng may microchip daw na i-inject sa katawan. So that's not true, pero kumalat po yan. There was also this video that na kumalat nung I think it was April or May, na supposedly video coming from video na tinake sa sa East Avenue Medical. But when we looked at that video, we found out that the same video was actually circulated. Actually, umikot na sa buong mundo yung video na yon. And some of the fact-check organizations from Brazil, from Spain and other countries also fact-check the same video. And ano siya? So parang grabe yung it's you don't know really where the information is coming from kasi it was being circulated via chat apps. So that was significant, I think. And what does that mean? So the impact of that is it affects responses to the pandemic, diba? The responses of the public, of authorities, as well as our own responses to the pandemic. It undermines scientifically proven prevention and response measures. It also prevents us from holding people accountable, or and at the end of the day, it can cause real world harm, even death, and it has done that. It has caused deaths and real world harm in a number of occasions. Now, the pandemic is one thing, but there's a very important thing that we very important thing that we've been monitoring on social media, like huge claims around around martial law and the Marcoses, and we collected data on pages and groups that were circulating then these claims, and ang nangyari po dito is this, there were so many groups and pages that were created, nag-ramp up yon after 2016, and we saw the ramp up start sometime in 2014 and then moving into the 2016 na yung creation ng so many pages na pro Duterte, pro Marcos, and they were circulating all of these false claims about EDSA, about the Aquinos, and about the achievements of the about martial law. Supposedly there were no there were may isang claim na wala daw human rights violations ng martial law. Merong mga claims about supposed achievements which were not really true. Even the performance of the economy, not true. But they are circulating. They were gaining a lot of traction. And one particular claim that we fact checked was this claim na supposedly the Marcos wealth came from gold, and gold that he got from a client na the Italianos, and this amount of gold, the amount of gold really that are mentioned are really terrific. They exceed the total supply of gold that can be mined in all over the world. And like some claims maabot ng 1 million tons of gold. Some claims medyo mas 200,000 daw. Pero yung 200,000 metric tons po. Yun na po yung total gold na minina sa buong mundo. So that's not true, but it got millions of views and got other a lot of similar content na with millions of views also on YouTube. So very significant because it is convincing people, and it is giving an alternative narrative to the to the fact, an alternative to the real fact that the Marcoses actually got their money from ill-gotten wealth, right? And that's affecting how the public view view them and view the former president. And may may impact yun sa society. So I'll just skip through this, but these are some of the claims that we've seen, and they're circulated in like hundreds of these pages and groups on social media, and 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 uh, and some of these are fan pages, but a number of these are pages that are posing as history pages. So yun po yung dynamic na nangyayari ngayon, and I'm sure you have observed that also, and it's really important that we study this and we see how and we make people aware that this is happening, because it's deceiving people, and it is causing and it is affecting how they make decisions. We looked at these some of the critical things that we have seen are pages that are supposedly airing hidden facts about history, and that has an impact in the way Filipinos perceive history now. So parang martial law is supposedly golden years of the Philippines, when that is not true, and the facts bear this out, even in terms of the infrastructure, or even the debt level, debt economy at that time. These were some of the meta-narratives we saw. And one meta-narrative that's always, a meta-narrative is essentially like a narrative that tries to explain, something that tries to explain a prevailing narrative. And these were the meta-narratives that were, they're wealthy to begin with. They're already acquitted of all the cases, when that's not true. In fact, Imelda was convicted in a number of cases, and there were the abuses were supposedly concocted by oligarchs and the yellow media, and then and so on. So all of these have been circulating and in tremendous numbers. In fact, the pages we've monitored, just the ones with the names of Marcos and Duterte, ang nakita namin were like roughly about 300,000 posts so far for the past how many years. And that's a significant number, flooding the ecosystem with this information. What's the impact of this? The biggest impact is distrust of media. So the journalists are now regarded as what they call prostitutes, and attacked online for anything that's critical of government. And you can see this even in our comment section. Since the martial law, the 2019 elections was the first election where not a single opposition bet made it to Senate. Made it to the Senate, and that's significant because then, who will raise who will be the counter argument? Who will raise counter arguments in important matters, important policy matters that need to be discussed, diba? If there's only a single kung isa lang talaga yung voice na naririnig sa Senado. There's been an acceptance of court rulings. There's very little on the court rulings overturning cases. Imelda is convicted, but she remains free. She was never arrested. And then there's this growing acceptance of authoritarian rule, hate, and violence. And you're seeing this every day. In fact, most recently, may mga killings na naman. And while nothing is being done, very little investigation is being done, And even the ano to, 'di ba, the Justice Secretary admitted so yun, it's continuing, and there's little outrage because of that. And this is very disturbing. So what can we do? And this is my last slide because I really want to hear or answer questions. One, watch your use of digital media and be aware of attempts to manipulate and the various ways that manipulation can happen. Learn to detect dubious claims. May mga fact check webinars po kaming ginagawa. Those are for free. Just wait for the announcements we have a Facebook group that is where we make these announcements and also even stream the fact check webinars. Helps learn to detect the dubious claims, fact check before you share, help spread awareness. So I see from the earlier from the earlier speech, there was a discussion about MIL and media and information literacy. So really encourage you to do that in your own communities as leaders. Report abuse. Make sure you don't just challenge and report abuse. So this does not mean aawayin nyo yung si tita o si tito o si lolo o si lola kung nag-share sila ng false claims. My own mom, she also we have a chat room for the family, and she also tends to because she's new to digital, of course, so sometimes medyo hindi niya alam kung ano tong sineshare niya, hindi naman niya alam kung ano yung mga URL and so on. Minsan may mga pamangkins, they tell her na when she shares stuff to the family chat room, they tell her na lola, don't share that because that's not true. So parang yung form of caring now is telling parang engaging with relatives and friends na na hindi pa naman nakaka-aware, and telling them when they're sharing dubious claims. But at the same time, we also need to be conscious that abuse does happen, and there are really bad actors out there that are out to disinform or to manipulate people, and we need to report those. And there are reporting mechanisms within the social media platforms now. Be conscious of those. But if you also spot dubious claims on your feed, do send them to us, because our team, we have a regular we have unit in Rappler who does the fact checking, and we can fact check those so that we can also warn people about those claims that are being the platforms are the main circulation mechanism, which doesn't mean that mainstream media also does not. Diba? Parang from time to time, it's also good to call out mainstream media when we are wrong, and we do welcome that. We at Rappler, we have a corrections policy, because there's no perfect organization, after all, no perfect person, and but at the same time, work with people who work with those na pwede namang makatuwang, 'di ba, na to address these issues. So and there's a Facebook group po that we manage with other fact check organizations. It's the link is on the slide. Please join that. We really encourage you to join that so that we can keep this conversation going. The Facebook group has I think around 3,000 members already. We don't just it's private to those to those who attended the workshops and the webinars, and really what it's about is about fostering that conversation, and even people report claims also to us through that Facebook group. And if you want to attend or co-host fact check webinars or MIL webinars that we do email moveph@rappler.com. So yun lang po. And I'm ready
Thank
for
you.
questions.
Thank you, Miss Gemma. So, meron tayong mga due to time constraints, we won't be able to accommodate a lot of questions. So we're probably going to limit to 3 questions only for this session. and then we're gonna close because we're already over time. So we have
Sorry.
first question, Miss Gemma. This is a question from Menandro. One of the
Okay.
successful malinformation campaign before was the Baron Butchokoy videos released, aka Pinoy Monkey Pride in 2011. I'm not sure if you've heard about this.
Nako.
Do you have researches about who is
No.
behind this?
Okay, please send that over. That one I missed. Okay.
Okay.
Kaka-launch pa lang po ng ano to, ng Facebook page namin. Pero ano to, that's
But
interesting.
do you know of remarkable other successful malinformation campaigns?
Marami po eh. I mean, we have a whole section of the page that's ano to, that's dedicated. I think what you can ano to, like for instance, the campaign against the ano to, against activists. I think
Okay.
I mean, it really depends on how you define success, di ba? Success could be I mean, in the success for a malinformation campaign or a disinformation campaign is really if people are convinced, 'di ba, na ano to, and I think the ano to, the Marcoses so far have been successful because wow, they nakabalik sila, 'di ba, in public office, and they're really well accepted now, and there's a really significant segment of the population that now believe that the martial law is good. so that's something, or even that there were no abuses then, right? So that's ano to, that's evidence of success for that ano to, for that attempt to manipulate, 'di ba? And what else? Another what you might call successful ano to, campaign is like the campaign to demonize addicts, for instance, na, I mean, okay lang silang patayin without due process, without ano to, di ba? Kasi, you know, the Constitution actually guarantees that before you are ano to, that every individual has a right to due process, di ba? And in a way, like alongside that disinformation campaign is the thinking that human rights is not good, 'di ba? Is not good for the population because nakakaano lang 'yan, nakakasagabal lang 'yan sa pagpapatay nitong mga addict na 'to, 'di ba? Right? But human rights is fundamental, right? And we fought for that. Our forefathers fought for that, 'di ba? But now that appreciation of human rights is not there, like maybe and ano to, parang you have this total disregard of the idea of due process, you have this total disregard of laws, di ba? So that's something to think about, and that to me is an evidence of success of an attempt to manipulate.
Okay. There was a message to me, but it was not sent to everybody. I think he said something like, as an MIL advocate, we shouldn't comment on social media or people with ad hominem attacks, but rather focus
Yes.
on facts.
Yes, definitely I agree. So kasi ang problema doon and really they're baiting you eh. So parang ano to, the way I see it is you do need to engage, lalo na kasi dati there was a time before na we didn't advise people to engage with trolls, 'di ba? Like don't feed the trolls daw. The thing here is that by not engaging, you're also not educating the audience. And your audience, so even the comment section is content, right?
Yeah.
So really social media has blurred the line between who is the creator of the content and who is the recipient of the content. So the audience, those who are who are consuming content are also creating content by reacting and by commenting. And that one, yung pag-comment, yung mga comments na yun, if you don't naman correct, then parang there's a perception that that's okay, right? But if you also comment and you use ad hominems, yun na, the whole conversation, it spirals downward and nawawala na yung issue. So when you do engage, if you do want to, we encourage you to engage, but if you do engage, stick to the issue, be smart, right?
Yeah.
Be respectful, di ba? Don't play the game, but educate. So the point is to educate the audience, right?
Yeah.
You're telling people na, hey, this is wrong, right? You challenge the lie. It's important to challenge the lie.
I think what most people are missing is that the moment they respond to someone, they're also content
Yes.
creators themselves,
Yes.
which
Even if you're
means,
just commenting. In
yeah,
fact, when you like something, in a way, you're already contributing to shaping that conversation.
yeah,
Because of the tyranny of the trends, diba? It causes that content to trend. By sharing something, you're actually performing something like an editorial function for your
definitely.
friends. Diba?
Mm. And I think if you speak the same language as them, like crass language, you can actually dissuade the moderates, people who are
Yes.
not necessarily fixated to one
Precisely.
side.
Oo. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Um, there's one more question here. It was quite long, so I wanted to actually probably ask him or her
Mm-mm.
to unmute him or herself, because I don't know if Chan is a is a name for a guy or girl. Hey Chan, can you unmute yourself and ask the question directly to Miss Jama? This will
Yes,
be the
hello
last
po.
question.
Yes, hello po.
Okay.
Hi.
Sir,
Oh, hi, Chan.
okay. I have something to ask to Ma'am Gemma.
Mm-mm.
Tapos ko na po siya sa chat actually. So, at basahin ko na lang po siya. Researchers show that women are seen and heard in media
Mm-mm.
messages much less than men. But
Mm-mm.
when they're included in the media messages, they could possibly be stereotyped, challenged, or
Mm-mm.
grouped, unquote and quote and unquote. And in worst cases, these women become immediate subjects of sensationalism. So what should be done by producers and consumers of these kind of media messages? And how do we present balanced news and avoid screening of information based on gender? And P.S. Happy
Okay.
Women's Month po to all the women out here.
Happy Women's Month then, Chan. So, ganito, I'm not sure if this will respond to your question, but we actually had this study about gendered, in relation to gendered disinformation. So, we studied messages on ano to, on online that are really misogynistic, and so it's funny kasi in the Philippines actually, if you look at the newsrooms, a lot of Philippine newsrooms are led by women. Rappler is led by women. Okay. So ano to, in terms of ano to, like the voice of women in Philippine media, technically medyo hindi na ano yung ano to, yung mga kababaihan. But on social media, what we see is that yung ano to, women are more prone to attacks than men, and when they are attacked, they're not attacked for what they said, for what they reported. They're attacked for their looks, they're attacked for ano to, for they're portrayed as ano to, they're portrayed as stupid, pinapalabas, and these are really ano to, intelligent women, but they're portrayed as stupid, and boba, ganon. And there's so much sexualization in the language, and then also, and this is something we observed in the case of ano to, in the case of Senator Laila de Lima, and Senator Laila de Lima in particular, yung grabe yung sexualization, and ano to, yung napaka ano talaga ng mga attacks against her, na including that supposed ano to, sex video na never really came out, and the pictures that came out were really not her. So may ganong klaseng ano to, parang may ganong klaseng approach in the way people, the bad actors online tend to treat women, and syempre ano to, so that's very important, and we need to be very conscious about that. We need to ano to, we need to call that out, I think.
Yeah. I think that's what they're saying, a culture of
Mm-mm.
vigilantism. You have to
Yes.
watch out for each other. Miss Gemma, actually, there was a slip comment from your side about the. Wait, I think that we
Yes.
saw a comment here, like one rush question from Brian.
Okay.
Pahabol daw po. The question is, may I know how to be an official fact checker at Rappler?
Ah, okay. We have, so we do these webinars. Well, we have our own fact check group, but we do this fact check ano to, parang unit at Rappler. But at the same time, we do these webinars. So you can start by attending the webinars where we teach the methodology of fact checking. But apart from that, yung follow up to the webinars, there's we conduct this post web this ano to yung mentorship program, pero yun yun medyo limited lang yung pwedeng mag-ano doon mag-participate kasi ano to konti lang naman ano, and that one is ano to more parang sort of a boot camp, medyo several ano yun, mga 2 months yata yun ang isang cycle, and that's to teach you talaga to do the fact checks kasi what we saw was that initially people were ano to, part of the training was spotting, how do you spot which ones can be fact checked, diba? Kasi some people naman basta hindi nila gusto, nire-report nila kasi hindi nila gusto. But that's not the point. The point is to have what are the parang identify what are the verifiable facts and how do you debunk them. So we teach that in the webinars. And
So
after
how do
that,
they
we teach
join
that.
these webinars?
May mga may call out kami. It's call out to the public and
Okay.
to.
So
And,
they're just going to wait for the
yes.
announcement in Rappler.
Yes. Check out the Move PH. Sila yung unit namin, Civic Engagement Unit. They're the ones who organize the webinars. And
Okay.
they make, ayan, may nag-post. Si
Okay,
Jen.
okay. So Jean just dropped the link in the chat option, guys. So feel free to check that link if you're
Yes.
interested to become one of the fact checkers of Rappler. Rappler is a member of the International Fact Checking Network, or IFCN, one of the
Yes.
verified organizations in the Philippines. Miss Gemma, I hope this is not counted in the 3 questions, the last 3 questions. I have one question I'm
Go
itching
ahead.
to ask. Because you mentioned earlier that there is that it's about trust to mainstream media outlets. So, dahil na-mention mo yung trust, the question to that is, how do you reclaim the trust to mainstream media?
Okay.
Because it's regressing right now, apparently.
Yeah.
You can't deny it.
2 points. So, of course, mainstream media needs to be trustworthy, needs to keep themselves. And we try to, in fact, when we sought accreditation with IFCN, that's part of it. There are disclosures that were required of us. We disclosed funding, there's disclosure of the corrections policy and methodologies and so on. So may mga ganun kaming ginagawa. And important yung corrections kasi really hindi naman tayo perfect, 'di ba? Nagkakamali talaga tayo. The point of it is, do you correct? When you when you are wrong, do you issue corrections? And corrections are important. And do you issue this silently or publicly? Like you tell people na, hey, this page was corrected. So that's important. We're actually very proud of our corrections pages kasi since 2012 pa, may corrections pages na kami. So there's that one. And for media groups who are interested, then like looking at building trust, that's one clear way to build trust. I think it's not about it's sinasaksak mo yung sarili mo, 'di ba? Kasi ina-admit mo mali ka. Pero accepting that you are wrong is part of it. So there's that one. Now pangalawa, well, technically we do need the help of the public, 'di ba? Kasi while we try to to hold ourselves accountable, at the same time, there's really a disinformation campaign against the press. Like we see quite a lot of these posts na hindi ito ni-report ng media or something. So we do need your help to to also address this kasi minsan napapagod din yung mga nasa sumagot sa mga ganun. In fact, we see quite a lot of people on our comment section, siguro dahil dun sa pag-fact check webinars namin na they respond and then they help us out by responding to people who are accusing us of of bias or manipulating or not being truthful. So that's something to that's something that's important kasi it's really both ways. First kami we need to make sure that we are above parang we're holding ourselves accountable, but at the same time the public also needs to build awareness of this of the role of the press, 'di ba? Just because we reported on something that is against your idol, but doesn't
Confirmation
mean it's not
bias.
true. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's not true. And in fact, it is to your advantage that we reported that, because what if ano to? What if you don't report that? That's how Rome fell. Because
Mm-mm.
the emperors hindi sila kino-call out for their mistakes. Ayun.
Okay, Miss Gemma. We have to wrap up. Do you have any parting words to our leaders, our audiences right now?
Yeah. Thank you so much for for the invitation to the organizers, and then to those who attended. I really encourage you all to to continue this conversation. Please join that Facebook group, and it's really important. I mean, this is a critical moment for us. We're near the elections. What we're trying to do here is hopefully by the elections, kasi there will be a rise in that again, yung misinformation and disinformation as the election season parang starts. That's why we're training training people to fact check, because we need to call those out. We need to call out lies.
Yes.
Yun.
And the next seminar workshop on
Yes.
March 27 is about fake news and disinformation. So I'm
Yes.
pretty sure our SK leaders will be excited. Before you
Okay.
go, we're going to present this e-certificate for you, Ms. Gemma. I'm just going to read the citation. Okay. This certificate of appreciation is given to Rappler and rapplersmove.ph for sharing their insights and experience as partner organization during the Media Civics Lab Seminar Workshop on Media Literacy and Awareness given this 13th day of March in Manila, Philippines, signed by yours truly, Gabby Leones, Chief Organizer of Break the Fake Movement, and Nina Lewis of Embassy of the United States in the Philippines. So everyone, let's all give Miss Gemma of Rappler a virtual applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Gemma.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so everyone, it's a wrap for today. Media Civics Lab. Once again, thanks all of you for participating and engaging in another session of knowledge sharing. We hope to see you again in our next webinar on March 27 for our seminar workshop on fake news and critical thinking, April 10 for the social media and law, and April 24 for the culture of positive participation. For those asking for the certificates, we will provide you certificates after the 5th workshop. If you haven't finished reading the reading list on media literacy and awareness, it's a PDF file that contains quizzes, guides, and articles. We posted that in a group. We sent that in Messenger chat, but you also have to check your emails regularly for regular updates. Please finish reading them over the weekend. Please also take note that we will be dropping the link to the lecture feedback form in the Facebook group after this event, so make sure that you submit them because we're going to monitor them for the attendance checking. Make sure as well that you're part of the Messenger group. If you want to be connected to other Media Civics Lab participants, Patrick Makiso of Media Civics Lab will reach out to you in the official chat. He will also be happy, I hope so, to answer some of the program-related concerns that you have. Please take note that we won't be having a workshop next week, but we will be having a watch party of the Media Civics Lab webinar on media literacy and awareness from last year with guest speakers TJ Manotok, Philstar.com editor-in-chief Camille Diola, Attorney Albert Daba, and Third Team Media CEO Flair Castro. That is on March 15, 6 p.m. Then we will also be sending the next reading material for the seminar workshop on fake news and critical thinking and disinformation on March 25, 2021. Again, if you want to take the detailed classes per subject, go to www.mediacivicslab.breakthefakemovement.com. Before I go, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Loop Digital, Foundation for Media Alternatives, Break the Fake Movement, U.S. Embassy, Internews, Tayo Foundation, and many other partners who are not mentioned. Please go to www.mediacivicslab.breakthefakemovement.com to have a complete list, to be able to actually see our complete list of partners and implementing organizations. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend. Good afternoon.
Sabi nila, ang mga babae ay pangbahay lamang. Ngunit sa katotohanan, ang babae ay may mas malaking kampanin na kayang tanganan.
Sabi nila, ang babae ay dapat na sumunod lamang. Ngunit ako ay may kalayaang pumili ng aking lugar sa lipunan.
Sabi nila, sa computer screen lang naman nangyari at hindi ito marahas. Ngunit hindi nila alam, bitbit ko ang bangungot, diskriminasyon pa ang aking dinanas.
Sabi nila, i-report ko na lang daw sa kinauukulan. I-block at kalimutan. Pero siya, may bagong biktima na naman.
Sabi nila ako'y babae lang, ngunit ako'y babae na nagmamahal. Higit sa sarili, sa bayan, sa walang hanggan.
Sa kung ano ang kakayanan ko'y, walang sino man ang makakapagdikta.
Babae ako.
Hindi pa aapi.
May prinsipyo at paninindigan.
Matapang, malakas, palaban.
Babae ako.
Babae ako.
Babae ako.
Kaya ko.